Welcome to American Education FM, everybody. I'm Dr. Sean Brooks. Hi, everybody. Welcome back. Here's where I will begin. First of all, as we are all aware, there's endless things happening. It's all at breakneck speed. Continues to be the case. And again, there's a lot of debating and I would say manipulating of groups of people and supporters or non-supporters, again, whether they be supporters of Donald Trump or not. And there's just this constant battle of influence and manipulation and who to trust and who to listen to and what to believe and pay attention to this, but, don't ignore this, and a lot of up and down. So, and back and forth and side to side and every other which way, I suppose. But either way, I want to make mention of this because I know that this is kind of an ongoing thing, which of course is not good, and it's not moving in a good direction. And I want you to know that I know this. And again, I think the optics are a bit weird because again, at face value, a lot of this certainly seems unconstitutional. But it really has first to do with a great deal of the Israeli influence, of course, that exists both within the White House and within other individuals, certainly from an optics standpoint. And so let me give you just a few examples of some things, of course, that have happened earlier this week that I think are a bit bizarre and certainly concerning and should concern individuals. But at the exact same time, we have a Constitution. And the Constitution, again, allows us to criticize whoever we want, whenever we want, as often as we want. And there isn't anything that can stop that. Again, they can pass all the motions that they want. It's, within state governments, they can say you can't criticize, for example, Jews, or you can't criticize these people, or you can't criticize those people. But isn't it interesting, of course, that the only group that individuals are not allowed to criticize, allegedly, although we are allowed to criticize them, happen to be anybody who is of the Jewish race? Well, as it turns out, again, that right there should be everyone's first suspicion. Again, even at just face value, why is that the case? Why is it that 17 countries, at least apparently, have, again, laws on the books that say that if you question the certain events of certain things, like the fake Holocaust or the Jewish people as a whole or what have you, that all of a sudden, you're going to get tossed in jail or you're going to get fined or this, that, or the other. That, of course, is totalitarianism. That is the exact opposite of what the Founding Fathers wanted in the United States. And again, they can make all the little inroads they want in the United States. The fact is that we have a Constitution. As long as we continue to use that and flex that, we can do and say whatever we want, whenever we want, as long as, of course, a law isn't being broken. Vandalism isn't taking place, things of that nature. Again, we can say whatever we'd like. And we have to exercise the First Amendment as much as humanly possible, and we are allowed to do that. So, again, it's my little speech just at the very top here, but either way, there was this first, and this was handed out by the U.S. Citizenship and Immigration Services from the Department of Homeland Security, and it was titled DHS to begin screening aliens' social media activity for anti-Semitism. Now again, if an individual wants to be a citizen in the United States, I'm not sure that that's the thing to be, of course, looking for. It could be that's the thing that they're naming in these documents, and it may not be, of course, the only thing that they're looking for, but even so, I understand the business of, again, allowing an illegal alien to come in who may or may not have social media and then wanting to go through that to see exactly what is transpiring here. The problem I, of course, have with all of this is they work in the phrase anti-Semitism rather than, of course, say violence against any citizen in America. I mean, that would be better. But we know, again, a lot of Jewish lawyers get around this and they start manipulating the words and they just want to hone in on, of course, protecting themselves. Which, again, should be the suspicion that why is it that you need all of this legal protection? What exactly have you done? So anyway, let me read this quick memo here. It says Washington, again, it says today, U.S. Citizenship, this is from last week, U.S. Citizenship and Immigration Services, USCIS, will begin considering aliens' anti-Semitic activity on social media and the physical harassment of Jewish individuals as grounds for denying immigration benefit requests. This will immediately affect aliens applying for lawful permanent resident status, foreign students, and aliens affiliated with educational institutions linked to anti-Semitic activity. Again, it should just be anti-American activity. It's not, it doesn't have to be specified to so-called anti-Semitism. Again, if anybody, shows interest in breaking the law and they want to be here, well then yeah, they should be denied. But again, this should also extend to any foreign Jews as well. Anyway, it goes on here. It says, consistent with President Trump's executive orders on combating anti-Semitism, additional measures to combat anti-Semitism and protecting the United States from foreign terrorists and other national security and public safety threats, DHS will enforce all relevant immigration laws to the maximum degree to protect the homeland from extremists and terrorist aliens, including those who support anti-Semitic terrorism, violent anti-Semitic ideologies, and anti-Semitic terrorist organizations such as Hamas, Palestinian Islamic Jihad, Hezbollah, or Ansar Allah, aka the Houthis. Again, I'm going to cut in real quick. I don't know if anybody saw this either, but Israeli investigators were investigating apparently the October 7th false flag event, and they were looking for the border wall security footage that existed right there apparently, and wouldn't you know it, all of the security footage is missing. Well, why is that the case? Because, of course, they don't want people to see that it was actually Israelis doing the breaking in, and it was Israelis doing any of the killing, and that it was Israelis allowing all of that to take place. If that's all on footage, which we know that it is, they, of course, wouldn't want anybody to see that. So again, we know who the real terrorists are, and yeah, some of them are Palestinian, so to speak, and some of them, of course, are Israeli. They're all over the place. It's just demoralizing. Again, it's the anti-Semitism fatigue that, of course, is setting in, and the constant name-calling and all of that other stuff. That, again, if you criticize them, well, there's something wrong with you. No, maybe we just know more. Either way, it goes on here. It says, quote, there is no room in the United States for the rest of the world's terrorist sympathizers, and we are under no obligation to admit them or let them stay here, said DHS Assistant Secretary for Public Affairs Tricia McLaughlin. It says, quote, Secretary Noem has made it clear that anyone who thinks they can come into America and hide behind the First Amendment to advocate for anti-Semitic violence and terrorism, think again. You are not welcome here, unquote. See, here's part of the tricky language in all of this, is that anybody can advocate to increase awareness of a group of people, knowing full well that it's not all of them, but again, it's certainly a great deal, because as we know, the vast majority are communists. Again, Jews tend to be communists. Whether people know that or not, well, it's a historic fact. 98% of them in Europe were communists, so that was, of course, the problem back in the 1920s, 30s, and so on. But either way, anybody can come to the United States and be critical of something that goes on in the United States or a group of people if they choose to. Clearly, what they can't do, regardless of the group of person or individual, is advocate for violent behavior. Specifically, of course, if you're attempting to be a legal citizen in the United States. It's a bad look. But again, it does make you wonder, regarding these Trump gold cards, who exactly, again, is forking over the money, the $5 million in order to be fast-tracked to be a citizen, to then, of course, start a business in the United States and then bring in who exactly to work within said business. Again, I have my suspicions about that. At face value, it seems a bit strange. It seems like, again, you're selling influence in the United States, or you're selling out the United States for influence. Again, I could be wrong on all of that, but that's just kind of what it looks like. It goes on, it says, and wraps up rather, and it says, under the guidance, or under this guidance, USCIS will consider social media content that indicates an alien endorsing, espousing, promoting, or supporting anti-Semitic terrorism, anti-Semitic terrorist organizations, or other anti-Semitic activity, See, again, that right there is rather suspicious. What does that mean? But it says, as a negative factor in any USCIS discretionary analysis when adjudicating immigration benefit requests. This guidance is effective immediately. For more information, visit our website. And there you go. Again, I don't like this. I don't like it. I understand the violence part, not advocating for violence. Don't be an advocate for violence if you want to be a citizen. I get it. I just don't agree with the singling out of who they deem to be quote-unquote anti-Semitic, which of course we know is a fake word. It's completely made up. And it's designed, of course, to make excuses and protect any illegal, criminal, or degenerate behavior that exists from that group of people or a individual. So, yeah, I'm not a fan and I don't like it. Just wanted to make that abundantly clear. I have two more examples. Here's a particular X post from arguably a satanic beast who will hopefully burn in hell, Rabbi Shmuley, who, of course, he and his daughter sell sex toys in Tel Aviv. Why anybody would assimilate with this individual or, again, endorse this individual is beyond me. But he reposted a Donald Trump truth post. And I'll read Trump's post first. It says, quote, I am proud to nominate, no way I get these names right, Yehuda Kaplan as the United States Special Envoy to monitor and combat anti-Semitism. Ambassador at Large Yehuda is a successful businessman and staunch advocate for the Jewish faith and the rights of his people to live and worship free from persecution. With anti-Semitism dangerously on the rise, Yehuda will be the strongest representative for Americans and Jews across the globe and promote peace. Congratulations, Yehuda, unquote. Again, these little task forces to combat criticism. Do we have that? I mean, do whites have that? Do blacks have that? Do Asians have that? Do other races have that? Or is it just Jews? Because again, if we do it, what are we? We're white supremacists. If blacks do it, well, then you're gangsters. If Asians do it, then I don't know what that is. But if, Hispanics do it, then everybody screams, go back to Mexico. It's all over the place. It's just so confusing. But Rabbi Shmuley then says this. Again, he should burn in hell. It says, I know Rabbi Yehuda Kaplan well for decades, and he will do an astonishing job, God willing, as anti-Semitism envoy at a time when it's most needed. May Hashem bless his endeavors. The Trump administration's record at fighting anti-Semitism has thus far been absolutely extraordinary and exemplary. Thank you, Mr. President, and God bless you always. Yeah, disgusting. The whole thing is gross. And then, of course, there's this. You have this pseudo-intellectual from the UK, a Douglas Murray, who apparently works for the Manhattan Institute, which, of course, is also a Jewish-owned NGO, if I was a betting person. And he's pushing this book that he has titled On Democracies and Death Cults, Israel and the Future of Civilization. So, again, his approach is essentially everybody needs to support Israel no matter what, because if we don't, then we're going to turn ourselves into a death cult, and that's basically the way that it is. So, he again has a conversation with Ben Shapiro where he has no problem basically saying that the murder of 15 million Jews would be a greater tragedy than the murder of 15 million Christians, because without Western civilization, Israel would perish. So again, it's just two disgusting people having a conversation back and forth, aimlessly nodding at one another in constant agreement because they're both Zionists and they're both disgusting, and of course they're probably both blackmailed. Again, how many kids has Ben Shapiro touched? That becomes the question. And then, of course, how many kids has Douglas Murray touched? And do you have film of these individuals doing such things? Who's to say? I don't know. But either way, Donald Trump again took to truth, and he said, my friend Douglas Murray just released a new book, quote, on democracies and death cults, and it is quickly becoming a bestseller. Based on his first-hand reporting, Douglas documents the barbarity of Hamas's brutal attack on Israel on October 7th and Israel's heroic response. The book serves as a strong reminder of why we must always stand up for America and our great friend and ally Israel. A powerful read from a something respected author, high profile, I don't know. Get your copy today. No thanks, I'm good. Again, this is the kind of approach and the kind of stuff that demoralizes real Americans. It really does. And it's really in bad taste. Again, I understand that there's multidimensional chess being played. Of this, I am certain, because again, Donald Trump makes a post like this, everybody dives into Douglas Murray, and you see what a query is. And basically, again, just how disgusting he is and how full of himself he is. You can just listen to the tone of his voice. In fact, I'll play some audio of him here, and trust me, I mean, he's a pompous asshole. So anyway, give this a listen real quick here in 3, 2, 1.
I mean, I've sometimes thought about it this way. I haven't tried this out in public before. How many Jews are there in the world?
15 million.
15 million. Okay. This is going to come. This may come across really coarse, but let me put it this way. I mean, there are lots of conflicts in the world, and I've covered a lot of conflicts involving a lot of people. But it's conceivable that at some point, 15 million Christians could be killed. It would be a disaster, a tragedy. It's conceivable that at some point, Burma, India, 15 million Muslims could be killed. It would be a disaster. It would be a tragedy of an unimaginable scale, of mid-20th century scale. But if 15 million Jews were killed, that's the end of the story. That's it. Now, what does that mean for the Jewish people? It's the end. The people who saw off everyone from Pharaoh to Hitler disappeared in the 21st century. Everyone else, in my view, wouldn't survive either. Western civilization could not survive the destruction of the Jewish state because it would be, among much else, the cutting away of the whole tree that we're on, and Western civilization would die. So I regard the existential threat against the Jewish people to not just be about the Jewish people. It matters deeply to me that it is about the Jewish people. But it also matters to me because it's about America. Could America survive if the Jewish people were no more on its watch, or everybody was forcibly deported from the Holy Land? Come on. Of course not. Could the isolationists bear the repercussions of that across the Middle East and elsewhere? Of course not. So I find this blitheness and the frivolity of it to be absolutely intolerable among the critics on the right.
There are a number of things here I'd like to discuss regarding that little clip there. Of course, he's talking with Ben Shapiro, who, of course, is an Israeli spy and a traitor to this country, and in my opinion, should be hung by the neck until dead. With that said, Israel needs government, and specifically, communist Jews, or Khazars, or whatever phrase a person wants to use. They need government, because without it, they have no excuse to do what they do. It's the teat on the cow, so to speak. If the teat goes away, then they wither away. Then Zionism withers away because it has nothing. It has no cash cow. It has no support. It has nothing. For the rest of us, we, of course, don't need government. We don't want it. But Zionists, and again, the rest of them, they want government to exist for the sole purpose of course, weaponizing it against everybody else who isn't them. That's it. That's not some high intellectual opinion. I mean, that's just face value. Yeah, it's pretty obvious that that's the case. But remember, he has this British accent, and he talks like this, and everyone from the Pharaohs to Hitler. Yes. And he talks like that, and what? Everybody's just supposed to believe that the shit that comes out of his mouth doesn't smell. Give me a break. These people are so twisted on history, they have no grasp of reality whatsoever. This is the same group of people, Khazars, Jews, whomever, that got tossed out of endless countries for endless reasons, all of which happen to be rather similar, as a matter of fact, and yet here I am, recording this on Palm Sunday, when in just one day, the tables get turned. Isn't that interesting? The old moneylenders, and Jesus actually started going to town on these people. Again, the part of all of this that is demoralizing is that all it would take is one truth post from Donald Trump, or frankly, anybody who is higher profile. And there may not be anybody as of right now. However, all it would take is, again, one particular post for the general public to look at and read, where he, specifically Donald Trump, condemns somebody like a Rabbi Shmuley. Again, I understand that he probably doesn't comment on Rabbi Shmuley much, if ever. Certainly, again, doesn't post about him. Maybe doesn't even take pictures with him or video. Hell, I don't know. Either way, all it would take is one little inroad and one little post against one of those individuals. And they simply say something like, or again, Donald Trump would say something like, so it's come to my attention that Rabbi Shmuley sells sex toys with his daughter in Tel Aviv. I don't condone this kind of behavior. I never will condone this kind of behavior. To me, it seems disgusting. The end. And just say that. That's First Amendment. He's entitled to his opinion. He can say or do whatever he wants after that. So be it. But coming out and making a truth post supporting Douglas Murray and his stupid little book, that's not good either. Because again, there are gullible people who will buy that book, read it, believe it, and then actually think that we have some kind of responsibility to defend Israel or defend Netanyahu or Zionism as a whole or whatever, and defend anybody who openly calls themselves a Zionist or says what Douglas Murray says. Again, he's British. We don't care what he thinks, because we don't care what Britain thinks. We made that decision a long time ago. But again, this is an issue here. So I just want people to know that that's not lost on me. I see this. I don't like it. I truly don't. But the thing, again, to keep in mind, which is a sad fact, is that Zionists and Jews in particular who happen to be communists by and large, they need government. Because it is their, whatever you want to call it, it's some kind of a shield for them. Just like, again, all the made-up words that they use and all the fake stories that they tell and all of the false flags that they engage in, again, you can take this back to any event in history you want. If a true telling of it actually occurred, everybody would figure out that there is a Zionist Jew behind almost every single one of them. 9/11 alone. That alone is enough. When people start to realize that there were no planes on 9/11, that there were Israeli bombs planted by Israelis and Mossad inside of, again, those Twin Towers, and then the entire story and script played out in front of everybody, that ended up, of course, causing endless individuals to go to war over absolutely nothing, and harm and kill, of course, God knows how many people. Too many to even count. Once people grasp that, and then they start looking backwards at historic events, that's when they really start to wake up to all of this. And of this I have no doubt, because more people are waking up to this, which is a very good thing. In fact, there was this particular poll that actually came out just this past week, certainly on April 9th, This is from antiwar.com, and it was titled, the poll was, Majority of American Adults Have Unfavorable View of Israel. Good. That's a good thing. So this, again, is where reality is always going to be bigger than any one particular post from any one individual on any social media platform. Douglas Murray can talk through his stupid mouth from here to Timbuktu for the rest of his life. But he's not going to be able to sway the vast majority of Americans who can clearly see what's going on. Here's what it says. A new Pew Research survey has found that the majority of American adults, 53%, have an unfavorable view of Israel, a figure that has risen in recent years. Of course, they would all say that's anti-Semitic. No, it isn't. It's just reality. It's just a just reality. And it says in March of 2022, Pew conducted a similar poll that found that 42% of U.S. adults viewed Israel unfavorably. The rise in the negative view of Israel comes in the wake of Hamas's October 7th attack, and blah, 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 blah. Again, every time, just having to even say the date as if it was a real thing is absurd. Unleashing of its genocidal war on the Gaza Strip, which Americans have been able to follow closely on social media. And here's a breakdown of the chart. Negative views of Israel have risen in the U.S. Percentage who have an unfavorable view. It says among all U.S. adults as of 2025, 53% have an unfavorable view. Between the ages of 18 and 49, 50% have an unfavorable view, and that is up from 35% in 2022. Among men over 50, 23% have an unfavorable view. And again, that's all among Republicans regarding those age groups. And then among Democrats, it says, 69% have an unfavorable view. And then 18 to 49-year-olds, 71% have an unfavorable view. And 50 years old and older, 66% have an unfavorable view. This is heading in a good direction for both political parties on their stance on Israel. Again, it's putting anybody who supports Israel or supports Zionism or any of that stuff on an island all by themselves. They can't hide behind their suits. They can't hide behind their ties. They can't hide behind anything else, any political issue or political title that they have. They just can't hide. By simply supporting it, you're sounding like a blackmailed and owned dumbass. The problem is that we have wrong messengers. We have the wrong people out there beating the anti-Zionism drum. That's the issue here. You have groups like Act Blue and Code Pink and all these other weirdos. They look weird, they look like they smell weird, and they're just they're just the wrong messengers. But they are exposing a great deal of things on all political sides, which is great. Again, I saw a clip of this same old woman who works for whatever it is, Code Pink. Again, it's a left-wing organization, that's fine. And there's, of course, they're anti-Zionism, which is also fine. But even so, they walk up to Representative Nancy Mace, and they start saying, why do you support AIPAC and why do you support Israel and Zionism? And Nancy Mace, she's walking as fast as she can, and she turns around and she openly shouts out, I love AIPAC, I love Jews, I love Israel. I mean, there's no brains behind those comments. But there's also, again, the wrong messenger regarding these old people, these weird old people from these other very odd organizations. It's just a bad look. It's like this. I'll give you another quick opinion on all of this. It's like the guys in Australia, okay? The nationalists in Australia. I love these guys. They're great. They're great dudes. They're, again, exposing corruption and Jewish influence in Israeli politics and within their entire pedophilic government and all of that. I love those dudes over there. They're doing great work. Just stop dressing in black. Stop dressing all the same. That's it's an image problem. They have a branding and marketing problem, and it really is. They're screaming at the top of their lungs while they're all dressed in black. It doesn't make them look any different than Antifa, and yet they are the exact opposite of Antifa. What they should do is just dress in street clothes. Just have a wear whatever you want day. And then, again, if they want to wear a hat or they want to put a mask on their face, they can do that too. I'd cool it on the shouting. Again, if you want to invite people in, they're taking the absolute wrong approach. They're taking the wrong approach. Again, this is where even individuals in those movements, in those nationalist movements, which again, I don't have a problem with them in the slightest. If they're advocating for peace and a lack of corruption and advocating for the non-erasure of their own race, I'm all for it. They just, again, they have a marketing problem. And they're actually not taking a tip from the National Socialists back in the day. Although they took a strong stance on a great deal of things, and visually so, there's no doubt about it. They took a pride in your own country. This is how clean our country can look. This is how sharp dressed our country can look and everything else. I just don't support the pajama wearing. That's all. Everybody wears the same pajamas, and they all look intimidating, so let's not consider that as maybe being a deterrent as to why individuals don't want to join our movement. Again, wear suits. Wear a 3-piece suit without a necktie if you want. I mean, just look different. Again, I've brought this up before, and it's a historic fact. He said it himself. Back in the day when Adolf Hitler was looking to, again, educate individuals about communism and how communism is degenerate and it is designed to kill people and enslave people, and this is the problem, and that, of course, this is your enemy, specifically Marxist communists from back in the day. He knew that their colors that they associated with were, of course, red and even black. So, of course, what did he do? Well, that's where, of course, the entire design of the swastika flag came about. The actual symbol itself, as I've been over on the show before, it actually means peace. It's a peace symbol. That's really what it means, and that's what it stands for, among other things along that same wavelength. But they incorporated those colors on purpose because they wanted to draw in individuals who maybe, again, saw those colors at face value sort of from a brainwashing standpoint and thought, well, what does this mean? What are they going to discuss? What are they going to talk about? And then they would hear his words and they would say, wow, this guy has a point. And then, of course, they would go out into society and they would look around and they would actually see what he was discussing and see what he was writing about. And then it would start to fertilize within their minds, and then they'd say, yeah, this guy has a point. No doubt about it. This is the reason that our country is poor. This is the reason that we have high crime. This is the reason why government in the past has disarmed us, and this is exactly why we are in the state of affairs that we are in. Now, of course, jump into this century and this timeline and what's going on all around the world, and look at the countries that are full-blown communists. Australia, Canada, the UK, Ireland, endless European countries, if not all of them. Of course, China, there's no doubt about that one either, but, again, it's not a good state of affairs. So communism is the problem here, and I just wish that there would be one post on social media from either Donald Trump or somebody that would openly say, hey, wait a minute, this isn't good. The question I have is this, and it really is kind of like the final question regarding this particular topic just for today, and then I'm going to move on here. But what is it going to take, and what is the strategy going forward regarding exposing all of these individuals that opens up the floodgates? Again, you would think that the Jews in that synagogue having their walls torn down and then pulling out stained mattresses and crawling out of the sewers and crawling out of these tunnels, you would think that would have been it. You would think that there would have been some kind of a post like, wow, this seems really disgusting. I want a full-blown investigation into all of these people, who they are, what's going on. This seems awful. You would think that that would have been it. And again, I understand that people are saying, well, this is why they're sitting on Epstein information, and this is why they're sitting on that information and XYZ. And again, why they're still favoring Netanyahu to some extent, or certainly from a visual standpoint, it seems like that's the case, even though it's pretty obvious Donald Trump doesn't like him and that he's just playing him. But even so, what is it that's going to be the straw that breaks the camel's back? That's the whole thing here. What story is it that's going to come out that's going to indicate to everybody again that Israel and Zionism have been the problem this entire time? Again, you would think the JFK assassination files would have done it also. Again, you even had Ben Shapiro out there saying, well, who cares? Who cares? Who cares? Well, if he's saying that he doesn't care and that no one should care, then that means that everybody should care. That means everybody should have looked into that. And that's exactly what that was. It was a Mossad operation. Funded by them, encouraged by them, and then, of course, our own government, and then, of course, the mob, who were actually the individuals who pulled the triggers. But again, this criminal connection, it's a RICO. I mean, it's a RICO case, the likes of which we've never even seen before. It's arguably the largest RICO case. So again, I don't know the answer to that. I'm at a loss for words because I just don't know what it's going to be. You would have thought, again, endless 9/11 truths would have been the straw that would have broken the camel's back on all of this, but again, who's to say? I just think, again, as this evidence mounts, a Pew Research poll like that is going to get worse for all of them, and that's a good thing. So again, we don't need government. We don't need to suck on the teat of government like we need them all of the time. We certainly don't. We don't want government at all. This is one of the funny questions that consistently gets brought up where people will say, well, why don't more conservatives get on city councils? And why don't more conservatives join school boards? The answer to that is very simple. We don't want government. We don't think city councils need to exist. We don't think school boards need to exist. Why would we take a position on one when we don't even think the whole thing should be around? But again, a Zionist needs government because they have nothing else. They need government to perpetuate their lies because without them, all they have is lies. But that's all they have anyway. So I could keep rambling about it, but I'm going to leave it at that. I just wanted to let people know here, and I've, of course, been talking about it for 37 straight minutes, but I just wanted to let people know again that I know that this is going on. I see these moves that are being made. I don't like them. And again, it's just full-blown fatigue. It demoralizes people. It tires them out. And then, of course, everybody gets back on that same train of calling Donald Trump Zion Don and this, that, and the other. And I understand the criticism. I get it. I fully understand. It's a bad look. It doesn't look good. But again, there's other things taking place here, and one of those, as it turns out, is money. You have to go after their money. If you go after their money, going after Zionists and Israel and money and Jews' money and control and all of that, that really is the head of the snake, because without it, they wither. And I have no doubt that that's happening. That's what the entire tariff process is, in fact, all about. In fact, this entire tariff trade war, quote unquote, that of course the normies are consistently screaming and shouting about regarding China, there's ample evidence that this was already agreed to in 2017. That Trump and Xi are not enemies by any stretch of the imagination, and that Russia was in on this also, and that now is just the time to trigger it. Because ultimately, again, it's doing endless things, one of which is creating a more nationalist approach, certainly when it comes to trade. Make in America, buy American, invest in America. And then we, of course, are the massive producers of copious amounts of goods and services that we sell not just in the United States, but to foreign countries, instead of us just buying foreign country goods and services. So again, lots of people have lots of different takes on it, but again, I share this particular opinion from a C.A. Vivek Katari, if that's his real name, where again, in their X thread, and they have a very long X thread on this, where they openly say, it's a bold, strategic, and risky plan, but that Donald Trump isn't trying to fix trade, quote unquote. They're remaking the system. Again, China has enough to produce for its own country, but we need to start producing for our own country. And then again, they lay out a scenario here, a possible scenario again by July, that China cuts a deal, therefore Trump wins. If China retaliates again, then you have a trade war. If allies drift away, then the U.S. is isolated. That's not a bad thing. That's a nationalistic approach. That means that, again, we have more of our stuff for our people. It says so leverage is peaking, and it says so is risk. Trump wants a win before election season. Xi wants to delay without losing face, and markets are bracing, not celebrating. Again, things are 100% fine right now. Gas prices are down. Eggs are down. That's even just very basic stuff, again, for the normies to pay attention to. But you have to go after the money. And you have to go after who's been controlling trade this whole time and who's been controlling the banking system and the debt and all of that. And we know who that is. I spent the first 30 some odd minutes talking about it. That is the problem, which is the interesting dynamic of all of this back and forth, is I can see all of these different sides, at least I try to. I'm not tooting my own horn, I'm just saying, like, it's not one-dimensional. Again, you have to go after the money. That is the head of the snake here. And this tariff stuff is certainly one of those ways that you get this done. But this was planned out long ago. And now it's actually happening. And yeah, people can't grasp it, which, okay, that's fine. Maybe they're not supposed to, but they'll reap the benefits when it's all said and done. Okay, moving on here. The Russiagate documents. These were all released over the weekend. Again, not too surprising, but I have a few summaries here from some other individuals that I want to read here. I also have a link to those documents on my website, AmericanEducationFM.com. It's also under the Government Documents tab. I believe it's number 53 on that giant list of documents. You can scroll down there and check it out. It's an article from Just the News, and then, of course, you can see the individual PDFs within that particular article. This was from MJ Truth Ultra over on X, and they said the following: FBI Lisa Page's chilling admission, if they start digging deep, we are screwed, unquote. Again, he summarized some of the pages here and said, newly declassified Crossfire Hurricane documents reveal FBI attorney Lisa Page's fear that the media, following a New York Times article, might start digging deep into the Crossfire Hurricane investigation, exposing their plot to undermine President-elect Donald Trump. Now, I'm going to cut in real quick. This is one of the funny parts about enemies and individuals who engage in wrongdoing, is they always overplay their hand. They can never stay quiet. So they ran this entire Russia hoax thinking that it wouldn't blow up in their face at any point in time. That right there is remarkably stupid. Because when you keep pressing on a particular issue, individuals are always going to turn around and simply say, I wonder if anything that they're telling us is actually happening or not. I wonder if any of this is actually real. And as it turns out, it isn't. The entire thing, of course, was fake. Now, we knew that from the start, but those who are brainwashed by the mainstream media actually, again, believe this at face value. And now, of course, that all of these documents are out where they are openly discussing, again, like text messages between James Comey and Andrew McCabe, where they're talking about, being panicked and we're in some deep shit here and, a number of other things. Well, yeah, because you were lying. And you were using the media with the media's help in order to smear Donald Trump, again, before, during, and after his campaign, and it didn't work. And everybody got caught. I remember watching those hearings, at length, when, in particular, Peter Strzok again was testifying, and I think Devin Nunes was the chair of that particular committee, and he was openly saying, arguably the dumbest thing you could ever hear a person say, where they're reading their text messages where they, of course, are being biased and one-sided, and then out of the other side of their mouth during the same testimony, they're saying that they don't let their political bias get in the way of them doing their job. That's completely ridiculous. I don't know anybody who actually believes that. Of course it does. You're either a morally sound person and you do morally sound things in the workspace, or you're an immoral piece of shit and you do immoral shit things in the workspace. I mean, that's basically it. It can't be both. His summary goes on here, and it says her response is a message to colleagues, quote, if they start digging deep, we are screwed, unquote, suggests the FBI team was hiding something explosive that couldn't withstand scrutiny, possibly evidence of their own misconduct in targeting Trump. Page also emphasized the need to maintain the FBI's good guys image, quote unquote, saying, quote, to remind people that we are still the good guys trying to keep America safe and not political operatives who sway elections, unquote. So yeah, it's an open admission that they're swaying elections. Again, you give these people an inch, you give anybody like this an inch, they'll hang themselves because they'll just keep talking, and they just don't shut up. It's amazing. But then, of course, in typical fashion, and it's justifiable, I mean, I get it, is that you get into the entire comments section of these particular posts, and people are just saying, well, this is all good and dandy. We already knew this, so why aren't there arrests? Why have we not seen anybody get arrested yet? Again, it makes sense. I fully understand the frustration. In fact, there was an individual here on X, and they said the following, Draza Smith. They said, I'm going to read all of the Crossfire Hurricane documents, but I asked Grok, their AI system, to give it a scan and tell me which laws were broken and by whom. And here's what it said. Grok said, number 1, FBI officials, Crossfire Hurricane, falsification of evidence. 18 U.S. Code subsection 1001. And then it says, who? Kevin Kleinsmith. Of course, I believe he was the first person indicted already in all of this. The next, it says FISA abuse, 50 U.S.C. subsection 1801, along with others, who? James Comey and Andrew McCabe. And then conspiracy to violate civil rights. Who? James Comey, Andrew McCabe, and Peter Strzok. Then it says number 2, Christopher Steele and Fusion GPS. False statements to federal authorities. Who? Christopher Steele. Conspiracy to defraud the United States. Who? Christopher Steele, Fusion GPS, Perkins Coie, DNC, Clinton campaign officials. And then C, Foreign Agents Registration Act, violation 22 U.S.C. subsection 611, Christopher Steele and Fusion GPS. It's not even done. Number 3, DNC, Clinton campaign, and Perkins Coie. It says letter A here, campaign finance violations. Who was guilty of that? The DNC, Clinton campaign, Perkins Coie lawyer Mark Elias. And then letter B, conspiracy to defraud the United States. Who was guilty of that? The DNC, Clinton campaign, Perkins Coie, and Fusion GPS. This is a boatload of people. It's not done. It goes on. Number 4, intelligence community, ICA authors. It says letter A here, misuse of classified information. Who was guilty of that? FBI officials. ICA authors, for example, James Clapper and John Brennan. And then obstruction of justice is another one. Who was guilty of that? FBI officials and ICA authors. It goes on here. It says number 5, the broader context, alleged suppression of evidence. Obstruction of justice, and who was guilty of that, of course, UK officials like Theresa May and Boris Johnson, unquote. It's treason, it's sedition within our own country, and it's espionage. And they all work together in an attempt to take down Donald Trump as sitting president of the United States, both before he was elected and then after he was elected. So yeah, these people have to hang. I've said it a million times. You know this. We have to see this. This has to happen. This has to be public. But this information, again, is out there. And it's rather clear as to what they were doing. Okay, I want to move on to this one. This is interesting. And this is lengthy, but I think it's worth it. Because this is peeling back an onion here that I don't think has been peeled back quite yet. But certainly this individual did. And this is an interesting read. This was on GreatAwakening.win. And someone dove into Amy Coney Barrett's past. and some connections that she has, specifically to a rather specified group that is called, apparently, People of Praise. This is an interesting little thread here, and I'd like to get into this kind of quickly, but I don't want to skip over anything because, again, we know blackmail is a big part of the game. We know that individuals are thrust on other individuals for a variety of reasons. And, sometimes it's for good reasons and sometimes it's not. But either way, this, I think, could explain why she has voted for some leftist issues and seemed to coast again right through the entire confirmation process by and large, although I'm sure it was on party lines if memory serves back when she was confirmed. Either way, here's what this particular thread reads. They said the following here, at least this is how they titled it. I did some digging on Amy Coney Barret and hit an interesting, disturbing bit of info. They said, I first used a quick AI search and, for whatever reason, it decided rather to tell me this. And it said the following, quote, Amy Coney Barrett's parents are John and Linda Coney. Her father was an attorney who served as a chief counsel for the United States Agency of International Development, USAID. And her mother was a teacher. Barrett has said that her parents greatly influenced her values and principles. It says, now I looked further into the claim and found that her father's name is actually Michael. And I didn't see any info on him, but it's still weird to me. Why would the AI say that? Anyways, this is the thing I found, and it's concerning. It looks to be yet another vector for a, quote, higher loyalty, unquote, to manipulate our public servants. Amy Coney Barrett is part of something called People of Praise, unquote. It goes on, it says the following, quote, members of the group swear a lifelong oath of loyalty called a covenant to one another and are assigned and are accountable to a personal advisor called a head, quote unquote, for men and a handmaid for women. The group teaches that husbands are the heads of their wives and should take authority over the family. It says, quote, current and former members say that the heads and handmaids give direction on important decisions, including whom to date or marry, where to live, whether to take a job or buy a home, and how to raise children. It goes on, it says, legal scholars said that such loyalty oaths could raise legitimate questions about a judicial nominee's independence and impartiality. They said, so it would appear that we need to find out who ACB's handmaid is. There's no telling how deep the manipulation could go with such a structure. Who's her handmaid's handmaid? Where does it stop? How do these spouses fit into such a structure? It says, quote, Mrs. Barrett, through a spokesman at the Notre Dame Law School, where she is on the faculty, declined several requests to be interviewed for this article. She declines through a spokesman to discuss this valid concern. Quote, a leader of the People of Praise, Craig S. Lent, said that the group was not nefarious or controversial, quote unquote, but that its policy was not to confirm whether Miss Barrett or anyone else was a member. Secretive group. Got it, they said. Quote, Mrs. Barrett was questioned in particular about a 1998 scholarly article in which she and her co-author argued that sometimes Catholic trial judges should recuse themselves from the sentencing phase of death penalty cases. They said current and former members of People of Praise said that Miss Barrett and her husband, who have 7 children, both belong to the group, and that their fathers have served as leaders. The community, founded in 1971, claims about 1,800 adult members in 22 locations in North America and the Caribbean. Both fathers were leaders, husband also in the group. Group says that the husbands are the head of the wife. This is true. Power structure. Wife has a handmaid, husband has a head, quote unquote. It says some members criticize the group for deviating from Catholic doctrine, which does not teach male leadership, quote unquote, in contrast to some evangelical churches. The personal advisors can be too controlling, the critics say. They may betray confidence, and too often they supplant the role of priest. It says, okay, now we're getting into the thick of it. So the heads and handmaids, quote unquote, do in fact control their subjects. Betray confidences, quote unquote, sounds like some blackmailing might be going on. It goes on, it says, quote, Adrian J. Reimers, a professor of philosophy at Notre Dame, was one of the founding members of the People of Praise, but he was ejected 13 years later after he said he increasingly questioned the leader's authority over members' lives and deviation from Catholic doctrine. He later wrote a critical manuscript titled Not Reliable Guides. It says, I couldn't find the manuscript, but I found this by the same author. I will keep looking for not reliable guides. It says, here's a small bit from the first thing. I suggest you all read through it. As it appears, our SCOTUS has a full-blown cult member on it. It says, quote, out of this particular document that they link, and the particular title of this, again, article from Adrian Reimers was titled Charismatic Covenant Community, a Failed Promise. But again, a particular quote from it that this author pulled, it says, let's see here. Quote, if the coordinators should ask the members to give half their savings to fund some work which they, i.e. the coordinators, believe that God wants done, then ideally every community member will recognize that request as a personal command. They said anyways, back to the main article, quote, Mr. Reimers said in an interview that the breaking point came after he objected to instructions a handmaid had given to his wife. That when he took his concerns to his head, he said that he was told that his wife was, quote, trying to undermine God's plan for her life, and that the couple should follow the handmaid's guidance. There are some indicators that both Mrs. Barrett and the People of Praise may have tried to obscure Miss Barrett's membership in the group. And then the author said, gee, why ever would they want to keep this hidden? It says, quote, links to issues of the group's magazine, Vine and Branches, that mentioned her have disappeared from its website, some of them very recently. One included an announcement that Miss Barrett and her husband had adopted a child. Another had a photograph of Miss Barrett attending a women's gathering. It says every nominee for the federal bench is required to fill out a detailed questionnaire for the Senate Judiciary Committee. Miss Barrett did not list any religious affiliations on her questionnaire, though many nominees have in the past. Administration officials said on Thursday that the White House has been advising all its judicial nominees that they need not list religious affiliations on their Senate questionnaires. Miss Barrett did, however, list that she was a trustee of Trinity School from 2015 to 2017, giving no further detail. Many schools have that name, but this one was founded and run by People of Praise, and trustees must be members. Mr. Lent confirmed that Miss Barrett was indeed a Trinity trustee until very recently. It goes on, it says the Senate questionnaire also asked nominees to list their public speeches and to supply the committee with recordings or texts. Miss Barrett listed a Trinity School commencement address she gave on June 11th of 2011, but according to a committee aide, she did not submit a copy of that speech. The person said, I wonder why, wonder what she said in that speech. It says, quote, I'm concerned that this was not sufficiently transparent, said M. Kathleen Cavaney, a professor at Boston College Law School, who studies the relationship between law, religion, and morality. Quote, we have to disclose everything from the Elks Club to the alumni associations we belong to. Why didn't she disclose this? Unquote. Again, the person went on and said, so to answer MAGA's questions about just what the hell has crawled up ACB's ass, she's in a fucking religious cult, that's what. We need to dig in on this group, Anons. They said we need to find her handler and her husband's handler too. This is total bullshit. Mr. President, we must impeach this treasonous judge. Seems a bit of a stretch, but anyway, they go on. And they said that they ended up finding the Not Reliable Guides PDF. They have a link to it right there. Let me download this real quick just for my own records. And saved. Okay. They go on. And they said, here's an excerpt from page 124. They said, quote, in this, perhaps more than in any other factor, we find the roots of the complaint by so many former members that the community is too rigid, legalistic, and stifling. It says reason is reduced to ordered outlines and algorithms. Love is reduced to loyalty and ordered service. Spirituality is reduced to, quote, being a good brother or sister in the community, unquote. And interiority is reduced to living submissively according to community order. It says communities of this sort cannot become integral parts of Holy Mother Church, for motherhood is foreign to their very essence, unquote. Again, this poster wrapped up and they said, edit number 2. They said, well, what's a good cult without a little child abuse? They said, from that wiki above, 1970s to 1980s. It says, in October of 2020, former member of the community, Sarah Kuhl, said she and others had been sexually abused when children during the 1970s by a community member who lived in her household. Kuhl's family at the time belonged to Servants of the Lord, quote unquote, a covenant community that later merged with People of Praise. Kuhl alleged that leaders of the People of Praise later attempted to hide and cover up, quote unquote, what they knew about the abuse, as they kept her abuser in the People of Praise community, it says. And then it says in the 2000s, in June of 2021, the Washington Post interviewed 9 members of a Facebook group who claimed to have been sexually abused at People of Praise community, and one person who claimed physical abuse. It says internal investigation. In 2020, the coordinator of People of Praise, Craig Lent, said in an email that an expert investigation was being conducted into the allegations. Lent said, quote, we consider allegations of sexual misconduct very seriously and invite anyone with information about any acts of child sexual abuse to act consistent with our policies, which include immediately reporting to the appropriate authorities, unquote. They just wrapped up here and they said, conspiratorial rant, remind me again how many SCOTUS judges have adopted children. What the actual fuck is going on? There's not that many judges, can't be a coincidence, end rant, unquote. And then somebody added a few more quotes here from the documents, and it said the group teaches that husbands are the heads of their wives and should take authority over the family. It says, quote, meet U.S. Supreme Court Justice Amy Coney Barrett's husband, Jesse Barrett, white-collar criminal lawyer, lifelong churchgoer, father of 7 children, and counsel for Fox Corporation. And then they said, so Murdoch controls the husband, and the husband controls the Barrett, unquote. And then the original poster said, wow, also technically, the Barrett has her own personal handler, and so does the husband, handmaid and head. So there's at least 2 nodes of control upon the Barrett, unquote. Yeah, this is interesting. And these kinds of associations, I think, are always interesting. And again, that's why I read it. You know, some of these church groups and these sub-church groups, they get real weird. And all these denominations get real odd. And they do behave like cults. Again, I've given you my experiences attending 9 separate denominations, and that's exactly what I witnessed. I did it solely as a social experiment. I wanted to see what the hubbub was all about. And this was many years ago when I did that. But all I saw was division. All I saw was secrecy. All I saw was a need to recruit. And it was a bit overwhelming. Again, people would surround you and be like, so are you going to come back? Do you want to be a member of the group? And it's like, take it easy. I don't like clubs. I don't like groups, never really have. Certainly not these. But again, they were all hating on one another too. Didn't matter which particular denomination you went to of one particular so-called religion or another. None of it felt like Jesus Christ at all. It was all just very cult-like. And again, that's exactly what this feels like to me. As I was reading this, for the first time, I couldn't help but think of Scientology. It's just very, do what we say and we think God wants this, therefore you have to do it. And then they just sort of submit, and then they just end up doing something that maybe they shouldn't be doing. So, I don't know. A lot of strings being pulled here. A lot of puppets, no doubt about that. And of course, puppets making their way to the Supreme Court, I don't think that should shock anybody. In fact, very quickly, in this particular document, again from Adrian Reimers, who left the particular group in their manuscript titled Charismatic Covenant Community of Failed Promise, here's what it says at the very beginning. And again, it goes through the entire history of this group, which of course was actually started by the Vatican, which that should tell you just about all you need to know. It says, the evolution of the People of Praise charismatic community is described as an emanation of the Catholic charismatic renewal, itself stimulated by Vatican II in the 1960s and 1970s, which saw much religious experimentation and the formation of new lay religious communities. It says, according to the author, an ex-member of the People of Praise, the group came to represent a spiritually poor, generic Christianity far removed from the Catholic Church. This, plus tight psychological and social controls based on theories of headship, quote-unquote, discipleship, quote-unquote, and commandability, quote-unquote, led the author and his wife to leave the community after more than a decade of membership, unquote. Yeah, it seems culty to me. Just a little bit. Certainly plenty of odd ties, and again, a group of 1,800, that's a bit odd as well. I'll tell you what I'll do. I've got that PDF, the giant PDF here, specifically, again, authored by Adrian Reimers, and it's titled An Analysis of Some Covenant Community Structures. It's lengthy. I mean, it's 152 pages, but if you're interested in checking this out, I'll put it under the Government Documents tab of my website also. Okay, let me shift gears here just very quickly back to Donald Trump, specifically the southern border. Apparently a national security measure, or declaring a national emergency, I should say, was declared at the southern border. Therefore, the military is now there. That, of course, is a good thing, and that's the way it should have been, I think, from the very start. But anyway, here was one of his presidential actions. And here's what it said. It said, now, therefore, I, Donald J. Trump, President of the United States of America, by the authority vested in me by the Constitution of the laws of the United States of America, including Section 201 and 301 of the National Emergencies Act, hereby declare that a national emergency exists at the southern border of the United States, and that Section 12302 of Title 10, United States Code, is invoked and made available according to its terms to the secretaries of the military departments concerned, subject to the direction of the Secretary of Defense. And then it says this, within 90 days of the date of this proclamation, the Secretary of Defense and the Secretary of Homeland Security shall submit a joint report to the President about the conditions at the southern border of the United States and any recommendations regarding additional actions that may be necessary to obtain complete operational control of the southern border, including whether to invoke the Insurrection Act of 1807. Now, you've heard me bring that up before because I think it got signed, and as it turns out, so does the author of this particular post. Again, this was on Great Awakening, and they said the following, truthfully, I always suspected that the Insurrection Act was signed after they stole the election in 2020. Trump told us many times that the Democrats were going to steal the election. Trump had an obligation to protect the country, and I'm sure he would use every tool at his disposal to do so. The declared national emergency is specifically oriented to the conditions at the border. However, we have seen with our own eyes that the judiciary, is fighting President Trump every inch of the way. Judges are preventing Trump from deporting the illegal aliens and forcing Trump to return MS-13 gang members back to the country. Of course, the judges themselves aren't actually doing that. They can't actually go and return these individuals back themselves, and Trump can defy most of these orders anytime he wants. It goes on, it says, preventing more illegals from entering the country is important, but it's also important to deport the ones who have already entered illegally. It says, do you think that the collaborative effort of these judges constitutes an insurrection? They said, do you think that the actions of these judges will push President Trump into signing the Insurrection Act? Do you think that the Insurrection Act was signed prior to Trump leaving office? And this upcoming date in when it is brought to the public's attention. It says, we were told military was the only way out. What are your thoughts? Again, some people responded, and they, again, said basically what I said back in the day, which is that we thought that the Insurrection Act was signed on January 6th. That there doesn't seem to be any evidence that it's been revoked in any way. Not to mention, if it hasn't been revoked and it's been in place and we've been under an emergency this entire time, of course, him being a war president, he would be able to carry out all of these things regardless of a judge's order, which certainly seems to be the case. Again, that's where a lot of this, to me, seems like a show. Donald Trump says that he's doing a particular thing. We see footage of the particular thing being done, and then we hear a news story about a judge screaming and yelling about a particular thing. And then the media jumps on that bandwagon and says, well, a judge said Trump can't do this. And then they just deflect as an administration and say, well, we're looking into it and we're doing this and we're doing that. Meanwhile, the operation still rolls forward and people are still being deported and self-deporting. And now, of course, with the particular deportation application that is in place, that if individuals don't self-deport, then they're going to start getting fined. I mean, talk about taking a particular weapon that Democrats, so to speak, thought would be an advantage for them, and now the good guys get in office, so to speak, and then they turn that on its head, and now it's being weaponized against illegal aliens. It's rather brilliant, if you think about it, but hey, whatever it takes to get rid of them, I'm all for it. Okay, speaking of that, this happens to, I believe, be one of the reasons and one of the methods in which it's going to keep illegal aliens from voting. And this, of course, has to do with the REAL ID, REAL ID. Now, first of all, I'm going to read this particular explanation or this particular individual's concerns with REAL ID, but I'll basically say this. If you look at the upper right-hand corner of your driver's license right now, and there is a star on your driver's license, then you already have REAL ID on your driver's license. Now, I already have mine too, and I think I got my driver's license renewed in 2023, and it doesn't expire until 2031. Now, when I was there, I openly stated that I wasn't interested in flying on airplanes. So, again, whether they gave it to me with or without my consent is anybody's guess. But me personally, before I read this particular person's concerns, I really don't have a concern with this so-called REAL ID. It's just a badge, an extra little logo, so to speak, that exists on people's driver's licenses. This will most likely be sort of standard procedure among everybody. Again, in particular, if you get your license renewed, if you don't already have it on your driver's license as it is. I think something like 65% of Americans already have it on their driver's licenses, and they didn't even know it. So I'm not concerned about anything. Again, I'm not flying on an airplane. I'm not going through TSA, and I don't care about any of that. But either way, again, me personally, I think that this has more to do with keeping illegal aliens from voting. Because an illegal alien can get an ID card, but what they can't get is a driver's license. Because with a driver's license, of course, you have to prove that you are a natural-born citizen. You have to prove you're a legal citizen of the United States. And they, of course, can't do that because they don't have all of the paperwork. So there's that. And I think that really is basically the entire aspect of all of this, that if an individual tries to go through TSA or an individual, again, tries to vote, and they don't have the little star on their driver's license that proves that they are, in fact, a legit citizen, and then, of course, their card gets swiped, and it proves that they're not a legal citizen, even if they have a fake one, well, then they get detained because they're in possession of a fake ID. So, yeah, I mean, as far as surveillance is concerned, there's some people who have concerns with this. I really don't. Again, we're being tracked on all our devices anyway. I'm not entirely sure why people would believe that having a star or an extra sticker or logo on a driver's license would somehow increase surveillance of any kind. I mean, the government already has your driver's license information. They have your birth certificate on record. They have a picture of you on record. They have your home address. They have a phone number. They have an email address. They have all of this information. They have your license plate, your registration, et cetera, the make of your car, the VIN number, all of it. That's not a new thing. But there's just a lot of people, again, who are basically saying that this is government waste. I'm actually going to skip this particular person's post just because they basically just said everything that I just said. But they seem to think, again, that this might increase identity theft. I don't think so. I think that it's designed to do the exact opposite of that. So again, I don't think that this pushes us more into a surveillance state or a technocracy, so to speak. Again, 60-some-odd% of Americans already have this on their driver's licenses. It just allows them to move freely because it's a quick check for someone looking who knows what they're looking at, that you are in fact a legal citizen. So I think this is moving its way toward voter ID, which theoretically, that's what your driver's license should be anyway. And if voter ID isn't you walking around with another card, but it's just being done through the Bureau of Motor Vehicles by putting a star on your identification, well then so be it. That works for me. That means that, again, all of those have to be checked. Hopefully that driver's license, which is legal in the hands of a legal citizen, has to be swiped through a machine and actually verified. So, I don't know. Again, if it's a deterrent to keep people from voting who shouldn't be voting, then I'm all for it. So, that's kind of my take on the whole thing. But again, a lot of people were jumping all over it, just like, it's technocracy, we're all screwed. We're going to have cameras coming out of our rear ends and monitoring our every move. Well, I'm not a fan of any of that, clearly, but they kind of already do it with all of our devices anyway. So again, I'm not advocating for that kind of thing, but I think this is more of a security measure, specifically when it comes to deterring illegal aliens, rather than closing the walls in on us, so to speak. Okay, shifting gears here, education stuff. First of all, this is going to be an interesting week in the town where I live. A lot of breaking news, so to speak, certainly at the end of the week. I will let some people know about all of that on Friday. It won't be for Friday's episode, although I'm sure I'll mention a great deal of what's been going on here that I've been keeping close to the vest for next Monday's show. But you can expect a Substack article next Friday, this coming Friday here. And again, this is a particular article that I've been putting together about a very specific subject and a very specific strategy in the field of education that I think hasn't been written yet, that I think individuals could learn from and certainly use in a positive direction. Certainly when it comes to, again, school boards, their responsibilities, school administrators, school teachers, right down to a very specific area of where you actually live, and learning exactly what these individuals are actually supposed to be doing, and how, unfortunately, much like bigger government, small government at the local level has no problem manipulating individuals, lying right to their faces and then just expecting you to believe it. When in fact, the very individuals who sit on school boards and work for school districts don't even know what their roles and responsibilities are, and what legal responsibilities they have. And then, of course, how even they, much like Russiagate and Crossfire Hurricane, that all of them, of course, scheme and meddle and try to throw individuals under the bus and unlawfully do so at the exact same time. So, wait for that here toward the end of the week and certainly next Monday's episode. With that said, I bet a lot of people heard of this particular story. This was from rvmnews.com. It was titled, "High School Calls Cops on Student for Asking Why There Aren't American Flags in Classrooms." High school senior in Baltimore County has filed a lawsuit against being suspended for raising concerns about the absence of American flags in classrooms at Towson High School, citing that he believes it to be a violation of state education policy and his constitutional rights. Parker Jensen, a senior at Towson High School and an aspiring U.S. Marine, was suspended for 7 days after he visited the Baltimore County Board of Education to inquire about the lack of flags in school classrooms. Jensen's visit resulted in police being called to the scene, where 3 officers responded to the school board headquarters. Video footage aired by WBFF shows Jensen at the school board building speaking with Richard Muth, the Baltimore County Public Schools emergency manager for school safety. In the recording, Muth informs Jensen that he's being suspended effective immediately. Jensen's suspension stemmed from his attempt to speak with school officials about their compliance with Maryland Education Code and Baltimore County Public Schools policy, which both mandate that the United States flag be displayed in every classroom. Quote, "I just wanted to know why the flag wasn't in our classrooms," Jensen told WBFF. He said, "Patriotism has always been a big thing of mine," unquote. Yeah, and good for him. That story alone, okay, take that and amplify it to a technological degree, and that's exactly what's been going on here at the local level. So make no mistake, school districts target children. School districts target parents, in particular when parents and children have concerns about something that's going on in the school district that is clearly a violation of their own policy. Instead of just fixing the problem and saying, "Thank you for bringing that to our attention, we will make sure that every classroom has an American flag because that is in fact state board policy, and we'll get on that right away, thank you very much," and then doing it, what do? They target the messenger. They go after the individual who raises the concern. This is standard procedure among these criminals. This is exactly what they do, but they don't get away with it. Now they're getting sued into the ground. So, again, I love it. Good for him. He took a stand on the right thing. He only has 2 classes in the school, by the way. And both classes, again, out of his own admission, he openly said they don't have American flags, and he didn't know why. So there's that. There's this one. This was from Ohio, actually not too far away from where I live. St. X High School, as a matter of fact, in Cincinnati. Old college buddy of mine used to go there. This is from Breitbart. Ohio teacher pleads guilty to sex with student. Shocking. That doesn't happen. Says an Ohio teacher who claims that her husband had neglected her pleaded guilty on Monday to having sex with her student. And Emily Nutley, a former teacher of St. Xavier High School in Cincinnati, Ohio, pleaded guilty on Monday to 2 counts of sexual battery after she was accused of having a sexual relationship with a teenage student in 2024, according to a report by Fox 19 Now. The 42-year-old teacher, who was originally facing 6 felony counts of sexual battery, could face up to 10 years in prison and will be listed on the Ohio Sex Offender Registry as a Tier 3 sex offender. The Hamilton County Prosecutor's Office said Nutley was in charge of a program meant to help students struggling with their coursework at St. X High School. The victim had been assigned to the program and started working with Nutley in 2023 fall semester. After that, the teacher began contacting the student outside of school hours, which included sending the teen nude photos and sexually explicit messages, prosecutors said. And it goes on and on and on. Yuck. Then there's this one. This also from Breitbart. It was titled, 2 LA schools refuse entry to federal Homeland Security officials. Now again, my take on this is very straightforward. If school administrators are keeping ICE agents or Homeland Security away from their schools because there are illegals within those schools, either working there or attending as students, then you lock up the administrators and any school employees for obstruction of justice. Very simple. You're getting in the way of an ongoing investigation. Get out of my way. Oh, you won't get out of my way? Okay, well, here's the steel cold handcuffs. Now go have a seat in the back of my cop car. That's all that has to happen. Arrest these people. Once they're arrested, they lose their licenses. Get them out of this business. Again, this is a perfect domino effect. You can ensnare so many people in this illegal alien trap, including endless corrupt school officials if you wanted to. It's amazing. It says 2 schools in Los Angeles Unified School District refused entry to federal officials from the Department of Homeland Security this week as part of an effort by state and local institutions to block immigration enforcement. And they're doing all they can, which, by the way, their superintendent, Alberto Carvalho, who I've brought up on the show before, this dude makes like $500,000 a year. It's incredible. The amount of just wasted money on his salary alone is astounding. It says the Trump administration is pushing back against so-called sanctuary jurisdictions that try to prevent federal laws from being enforced. Late last month, the U.S. Citizenship and Immigration Services with the Department of Homeland Security announced that it would no longer conduct citizenship ceremonies in sanctuary states and cities except on federal property. Again, it says 2 individuals arrived at the Lillian Street Elementary School's main office in LA and identified themselves as representatives of a federal agency, according to the message school officials sent to parents and others. See, isn't that hilarious? They have no problem alerting parents and students to ICE agents that show up. But when it's a matter of their own negligence regarding any other issue, then they usually keep it a secret, and they don't tell parents or anybody else, unless, of course, a citizen brings it to everybody's attention. Yikes. It says individuals also showed up at Russell Elementary School. Both schools are located in South Los Angeles, Florence Graham neighborhood. On Wednesday, an LAUSD spokesperson confirmed the individuals were from Homeland Security Investigations Unit within the Department of Homeland Security, not agents from ICE. District officials did not say why the individuals were there or release additional details about the visit. It says, quote, after following district protocols, school administrators denied entry to the individuals and they left. There you go. So schools are sanctuaries now. Keep that in mind going forward. Again, I said this a long time ago. Some of these people are self-deporting, others are digging in like ticks, and schools themselves are becoming safe havens for this kind of behavior. It's beyond gross and remarkably unsafe at face value. Now get a load of this one. You want to talk about stupidity and voting for your own stupidity and, of course, taxing yourself into oblivion. This right here was sent to me by Luther Smith. Thanks, Luther, for sending this my way. Kansas City, Missouri voters say yes to a $474 million bond issue in landmark vote. There appears to be some audio with this. Give this a listen in 3, 2, 1.
Morning. We have live team coverage on the biggest ballot issues in our area. So let's start with KCPS, who approved a landmark $474 million bond proposal last night. An overwhelming 85% said yes to that bond. Let's get to KSHP 41 news anchor Taylor Hemness live at Southwest High School, which will be turned into South Middle School, one of the schools that will get money from this bond in what has really been a generational decision. This hasn't happened in decades for this district.
Yeah, that's a great way to put it, Lindsay. And we want to keep reminding people, as we said yesterday morning, the total amount is going to be $574 million. You've got the 474 voters approved last night in that bond election, then the $100 million from a COP bond the district awarded itself. It's basically like the district's version of a home equity loan earlier this spring. That's also going to be part of this equation. So more than $500 million in funding over the next several years for KCPS. The first time in almost 60 they've done something like this. Last night, obviously, a watch party from supporters of this measure, from the district, from the city, all gathering to hopefully, and turned out they did get to, celebrate what voters were going to do.
And really see how democracy works, and really how a community can really lift each other up.
So that's people who brought their kids last night to that watch party to see. Now, we mentioned Southwest Middle School, where I'm standing here this morning. You may be familiar with this spot because this is obviously a prime location. 65th and Warnell, heavy traffic's been going through all throughout the morning. I've seen multiple people jogging, walking their dogs. This is a prime spot in Kansas City, but it's sat empty for a while. If you're not familiar with this location, this was built in 1925, actually. It's going to get about $45 million in funding from this bond election. From 1990 to 2005, it was Southwest Charter School. Then it became an early college prep school, and then it closed back in 2016. Now, South Middle School is what this is going to be called. Will allow KCPS to transition to 6th through 8th grade middle schools is what they want to do. That was the top choice out of 4 possibilities for a new middle school. 2 others were to build new locations. What they actually decided to do was to renovate Southwest High School, the former that high school, I should say. We also should point out The GO bond is only covering part of this, that $45-ish million coming from the GO bond. The district says to fully do this, they're going to need another $25 million on top of that. And that will be a different fundraising campaign as far as what's possible for this. Again, we've said it all throughout the morning at the multiple locations where we visited. This is a big day for Kansas City, but it's going to be several years of change for Kansas City to implement all this funding. It's not going to happen overnight. This is a prime example of what will be coming in the years to come. One of the biggest ticket items from this bond election is a brand new elementary school. 2 new elementary schools will be purchased through this bond election.
So I think it's safe to say, I'm going to stop it there. I think it's safe to say that 85% of the voters in that area have lost their minds. Again, I can't figure it out. It's clearly brainwashing. There's no other explanation for it. You're taxing yourself even long after your children attend that brainwashing institution. Nothing is free. This is not, well, the state's just going to fork over the money. No, if you live there, your taxes are now going through the roof. I got nothing. I don't know why people tax themselves. They already live in a terrible area. Again, I don't get it. I just don't get it. And they think, again, that having schools in an area somehow makes the area better. I don't know who started saying that line and started believing that line of so-called thought. There's no proof that says that that's the case. Again, when schools aren't around, taxes are lower. When schools aren't around, you have less drugs. When schools aren't around, you have less crime. When schools aren't around, you actually have more free thought and less brainwashing. I mean, hell, I live in a university town. You wouldn't believe the amount of brainwashing in this place. It's nuts. But again, nothing is free. And these people get all excited because, oh, we're going to get a renovation, or, oh, we're going to get a new school that we'll never see and never teach in, and, oh, this is great. You can throw all the money at this you want. The brainwashing continues. And again, these people, I mean, it's just, I pity them. They know not what they do. They just don't know. They think they're helping people, and they're just not. Again, these buildings were sitting vacant. They would have done well to pay for the demolition of the building and then sell the property, and then keep the money of the property and sell it to another business, or some kind of a little strip mall conglomerate or something along those lines. Again, no one was in this building to begin with. And as you heard the guy say, $500 million is ultimately what they're getting, but that's not even enough. They need at least $45.7 more million. 500's not enough. That won't get the job done. No. That'll build a couple of elementary schools, but we still want to renovate this huge old building from the 1920s and put an addition on the back. But we're going to have to do another bake sale for that $45 million. They're just going to tax people more. That's all they're going to do. And people will vote for it because they're stupid. Again, I don't understand. I really don't understand it. You can throw all the money you want at this business. You can throw it into buildings, you can throw it in materials, you can throw it into technology, you can throw it into whatever. If you're lying to people and misleading them, it doesn't matter what the paint on the walls looks like. None of that matters, and it'll never matter. They're still going to leave there with no skills, no education, and not knowing the truth about the world we live in. That's the biggest problem. That, again, is why this business cannot be reformed. It just can't. It has to be abolished. And people, again, have to leave this system. They have to leave it in the dust and make it the minority. But hell, if people want to tax themselves into oblivion and waste copious amounts of money that they don't have on a building that they're never going to use, that they're not going to benefit from, well, then you get exactly what you deserve, I suppose. Beyond sad. I'll just leave it at that. Again, I can't believe people vote for taxes. It's just nuts. Here's a good thing, though. End on a positive note regarding education. This was from the Liberty Daily, and it was titled, "New Research Shows That Christianity is Growing in America, Reversing the Downward Trend." It said Pew recently reported in its annual religious study, quote, "After many years of steady decline, the share of Americans who identify as Christian shows signs of leveling off." It says Pew began its religious poll in 2007. It's not only leveled off, it's actually increased, which is great, certainly since what appears to be 2021. It does, however, say this. It says, while these trends are encouraging, there's still cause for concern. The majority of younger Americans are now non-Christian, and the proportion of young Christians has fallen significantly in the past 10 years. It says, however, COVID-19 seems to have disrupted this trend of decline among young people somewhat. The Wall Street Journal's Claire Ansberry, writing on polling data from the Springtide Research Institute, reported in 2023 that a growing share of 18 to 25-year-olds say that they believe in the existence of God or a higher power. This figure started to grow as young people reported a loss of connection and meaning coinciding with COVID-19 isolation. It says the rise in faith is good for public health, as numerous studies confirm the mental, physical, and emotional benefit of personal and group religious practice. It says women who attend religious services are at least weekly, it says, are 68% less likely to die of death of despair, quote unquote, suicide, drug overdose, or alcohol poisoning. Men are 33% less likely, according to 2020 research from Harvard University's School of Public Health. It goes on and on and on. Okay, a couple of things here. First of all, any leveling off or an increase in Christianity in America is an excellent thing, certainly among youth. I think that, too, is an excellent thing. Because, well, Jesus saves, and everybody should know that. The problem is that this is exactly why the public schools fail. If the public schools taught the truth, it's scientifically provable that God is real. 100%. That can be done in one day in one science class. Not difficult. This is not complicated. There's video evidence that this is the case, that we, of course, don't live on a spinning ball, and this is, in fact, a creation of God, that it is not some mystical thing that randomly existed at some point in some time or space or galaxy far, far away with spaceships and we can land on Mars and the moon and all this other bullshit. As soon as the truth actually gets told in American schools, that's when Jesus himself will show up. But that's not happening in American schools. It's all deception. And that's exactly why, again, these institutions, again, should not be funded. It's because they're just not teaching the truth about the real world that we literally walk on. That's the issue here. But if more people, again, certainly youth, 18 to 25, are finding Jesus, then excellent. I'm all for that. Not to mention, and this should be mentioned, of course, and you're well aware of this, that if such a thing were ever actually taught in a science class, or even in a history class, the actual ground that we walk on and who created it clearly, if that were taught, the teacher would get fired. They would be reprimanded. A student would go home and complain to their parent. This is the society that we live in. That when you actually teach the truth to someone, even when you're tasked to do it by contractual obligation and paid to do it, you will be scolded, if not lose your job, if not lose your license. That's just not something that can be reformed. In fact, you may recall even when inroads are made, or alleged inroads are made, for example, Ryan Walters, the Oklahoma State Superintendent, for example, he mandated the inclusion of Bibles and Bible school curriculum, and that, again, Bibles be purchased, at least 500 for Oklahoma classrooms. That's not a lot of classrooms, purchasing 500 Bibles, but lawyers have intervened, and now apparently is set to be in front of the Oklahoma Supreme Court at some particular point in time. And we know they're going to scream the false definition of separation of church and state, even though that's not a law and that's not what it means. But they're going to scream that because they have nothing else to scream. So as long as those fights continue to exist, again, these are not the environments for children. They just aren't. You shouldn't have to wait on government to get the truth. Just find it yourself. Separate yourself from government, and you will find it on your own. And you'll save your children a whole lot of time and a whole lot of headache later in life. Because I think everybody can testify to this one, certainly the awake crowd who listens to this, that waking up is not easy. It's painful. Again, waking up from a lifetime of brainwashing is a painful process. And looking into suspicions on a great many subjects and arriving at the stone-cold truth as to the world we live in, that's going to shake people to their core. Some people snap. Hell, it's cost people their marriages. It's cost people their lifelong relationships that they've had. In fact, speaking of that, just to transition here to the conclusion, jab-related stuff also, you talk about a wake-up moment for a great deal of people. I think it's going to come this September. In the last cabinet meeting, RFK Jr. said that he has tasked already hundreds of scientists from all around the world to look into the causes of autism. Now, we know what that is. And in perfect defense mode, again, all these other whack job doctors who have been giving vaccinations for their entire careers, certainly at the FDA, CDC, and other major institutions like the NIH, which control both of those, they, of course, are taking to the airwaves, and they're doing whatever they can to tell everybody that vaccination is the only way to go, that you need more vaccinations. Again, Texas state officials are even bringing it up when it comes to measles. They keep mentioning it. Make sure and get your measles vaccine because there's been 500 measles cases and, well, keep getting your measles vaccine. You get measles from being vaccinated. It's a symptom of being poisoned and being around the poisoned. That's it. But come September, if somebody isn't assassinated before the release of this report, ladies and gentlemen, it's going to show that vaccination is the cause of autism. That all of the additives in all of these vaccinations are the cause. The correlation is crystal clear. For people to not look at it, well, they must be vaccinated. Perhaps they're autistic. It's right in front of everybody's face. But again, to make a declaration like that in a cabinet meeting, that's something that's never happened before. That's a big, big deal. Because Donald Trump knows what the cause is, RFK knows what the cause is, but you can't just say it, because if you said the answer right now, everybody would lose their minds like they're already losing their minds. You have to slow roll this. You have to, again, have the literature behind it. You have to compile all of this literature, not to mention it's already been written. All of these studies have already been conducted, whether they be behind-the-scenes studies. Maybe they didn't have particular approval at the time, but they were ready to have approval. Now they do. Now they're rocking through with them. They already have the answer. They already know what it is. The September warning, in my opinion, is what they're doing is they're giving doctors the ability right now, hospitals, doctors, pediatricians, you name it. They're giving them the opportunity to stop vaccinating for everything. Because come September, they're going to look like dumbasses. Because if they're still doing it from now through September, well, it's proving to people that they're incapable of reading, listening, and applying what they've been told and applying the truth, which is really the definition of insanity. So again, this is a huge deal. It's just a huge warning. It's a huge shot over the bow, and I love it. This is a very good thing. This is good news. There was also this, just very quickly, and in conclusion, there was a Joni McGarry, I'm saying her name correctly here. She wrote a Substack article titled "Safeguarding Medical Education Freedom: Our Brief to Secretary McMahon on Protecting Healthcare Students from Vaccine Mandates." What she ended up doing with a great deal of other health professionals in numerous fields within the medical profession is basically putting together a particular letter to Linda McMahon, Secretary McMahon, saying that based on the COVID-19 vaccine mandates and that executive order, can you please include medical students and medical training in that executive order that frees them from being forced to take vaccines. Again, these are very knowledgeable people trying to get ahead of this because, as we know, if you're entering the medical profession, they make you take every jab known to man, in particular in medical school. Now, yes, there are exemptions that do exist, and maybe those exemptions are accepted, and maybe in a lot of times they are not. Certainly not in the California medical system anyway. But again, they wrote out this giant memo to Secretary McMahon saying, can you please again include medical students within this particular executive order because it has to take place. Again, these are the people on the front lines being poisoned first, and then they're being tasked with the mission of poisoning other people, whether they know it or not. So this is a good move. I'm certain Linda McMahon has read this. I wouldn't be surprised if, again, this goes into practice, hopefully nationwide. That would be a fantastic thing. Certainly at the very least, regardless of the state, there would be vaccination exemptions that would be filled out. But again, as I've said before, if you offer an exemption, it has to be accepted because why else offer it? Offering the exemption means that you're allowing people, again, to just say no. So why even bother? Just let people say no. So there you go. Again, good things are happening, no doubt about it. A lot of shady things happening, like I said at the top here, but a lot of good things happening as well. This was a long one, ladies and gentlemen. My apologies on the length. Thanks for listening if you stuck with it, and I'll catch you on Wednesday. Peace. Thank you for listening to American Education FM. Make sure and check out AmericanEducationFM.com for more information. Take care and God bless.